All right, Saturday night, the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on September 21st, 2024. People are trickling in here. I'm Kris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects, on location down at KeyBank Center with a nice looking new roof. They showed a little video of the roof construction in between periods, so that was nice. Got caught up on my construction chops. Feel like I can go put a roof on my house now. That's Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic here on the right side of the screen. Before we begin, if you could please, on your way in, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please, as always, leave a 5-star review. Hell, if you left a 5-star review last year, go and leave another one. So the Sabres opened up their preseason schedule tonight against Pittsburgh's B team. They picked up a dominating 7-3 victory over the Penguins. 13 Sabres get points tonight as they outshoot the Penguins 43-18. JJ Peterka picks up a hat trick. Owen Power, Henry Jokiharju, who himself had a 3-point night. Sam Lafferty and Dylan Cousins add single goals to Peterka's hat trick, and UPL stopped 15 of 18 for an .833 save percentage. So on Monday, the Penguins prospects closed out the prospects challenge by putting up an 8 spot on the Sabres. The Sabres returned the favor tonight and put up 7. You put that nugget in your story, Matthew, if you're going to write one tonight. At any rate, all right, that's my contribution. Matthew, you were down there tonight at the arena. Very high level thoughts. What did you think about this Sabres kind of NHL roster and their performance against a overmatched Penguins squad? And we can talk a little bit about the vibe in the arena too. Were people hyped? What was the story down there tonight?
Yeah, people were excited. The crowd wasn't terrible considering it was preseason. You got the new, scoreboard, the brand new roof, as you mentioned, which doesn't quite have the same pop as a new scoreboard, right? You don't walk in and think, it's the things you don't think about though, right? Like, hey, I'm staying dry tonight, and that's good. But I thought, pretty decent energy in the building. Look, this was what had to happen tonight, right? When you looked at the rosters this morning, you thought, okay, this has to be a convincing and thorough victory for the Sabres. And it was. The first period, I think, was a bit of a struggle. They came out slow. Certainly let up one that was a little too easy, I thought. But after the first period, they kind of settled things down and really took off. So plenty to feel good about, I think, if you're the Sabres, but also plenty to recognize, 3 goals went in, and, it wasn't perfect by any means considering the level of competition, right? That I think you mentioned there was 6 players on this roster, or 5, 6, 7 Penguins that played in the Prospects Challenge last weekend.
Yeah, I think it was 6. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but it was like a third of their roster, third of their skaters almost. Yeah.
And the only Sabre on the ice that played in the Prospect Challenge last week was Yuri Kulik, who was arguably the best player in the tournament. So,
yeah,
in that, that's just the context to, what the Sabres, were up against tonight. But I still thought from a high level, you could see the subtle differences in how they want to play. And this turned out to, I think, be a good chance to work on some of those things, whether it was compete, get into the net. Of course, I think it's going to be a little harder to get to the net and win 50-50 battles against a legitimate NHL roster, but you can sense just in the first few days of practice, one preseason game, a certain level of buy-in to what Lindy Ruff is selling. These guys asked for this type of coach. They got it. And now I think they are, easy to do 3 or 4 days into camp, but certainly better than the alternative. And see JJ Peterka get a hat trick, doesn't really matter who that's against. That's going to make Sabres fans feel pretty good. He scored in the scrimmage on Friday as well. He seems pretty much locked in on that top line. So yeah, plenty of good things, I thought, from the Sabres tonight.
Yeah, I think the most encouraging thing is that I think they'll be okay against Red Bull. when they get over to Europe. I think that this was kind of a litmus test for that game. But yeah, to your point, I don't know if this is a litmus test against the rest of the NHL. But I guess we'll find out about that. I guess before, we don't need to go too deep on this game itself. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You just kind of capsulized it, I think, properly. Were the giveaways, I don't know if you were looking at NHL.com, were those giveaway stats right? After the first period, and I wrote it down. I mean, the final giveaway stats were 24 giveaways for Buffalo to 14 for Pittsburgh. Does that seem right? Because I think it was like they had him at like 14 giveaways in the first period to just 2 for Pittsburgh. I don't know if that's
It seems
it didn't
generous.
feel it didn't
Like,
feel that way watching the game, but hey, the eye test doesn't always match the numbers, right?
they were giving the puck away a decent amount, but that does seem a bit heavy. I thought that was part of the problem in the first. Just they weren't sharp. They weren't quick. The pace. And Lindy Ruff brought that up after the game, that the pace is still not quite where he wants it to be in terms of, guys supporting the puck and hitting lanes. So I think that's where some of that showed up. I don't know if those numbers are right, but I'm sure Lindy will use them at practice to light a fire under the guys. Maybe he was having them gas up the numbers just so he can have a good coaching point.
Lindy's definitely he has some things to show them. I think like, it was Thompson's penalty, right? In the first minute of the game. Like I was waiting for Tage to have to go full Willie Mays Hayes and do 10 push-ups right there on the ice. After that, I was like looking for that. There were some things that I didn't, love. Like I think it was midway through the first period, Jack Quinn had one of those giveaways where he was facing the wall and he threw a blind back pass to center ice. It was a turnover. Little things like that, I think Lindy will definitely show on video. But I think you're right, though. Like the buy-in is there in the first game, and it better be, right? It's a fresh message that these guys have had. Guys were back checking. You saw 5 blue jerseys below the dots coming back on the back check in the defensive zone more often than not. I thought that was good. Guys were using their bodies. Maybe some guys that weren't using their bodies all the time last season were definitely getting bodied, putting bodies on guys tonight. Will that be the norm? We'll see. We're not going to get all gaga over one game, but you definitely saw a different look to the team. Tage was coming back hard on the back check, using his body. Guys like that were doing things. Benson, I thought Benson was kind of fun. He was kind of getting his nose dirty pretty early in the game. And then, of course, threw a couple gloved punches. I think he kept his gloves on for that in the third. But yeah, that was we don't need to go too deep on that, but I agree. I think that you can see some buy-in early in the season. That's encouraging. And I think that the vibe that that new line brought to the ice tonight, I think was very noticeable with Malenstein and Obey-Kubel and Lafferty. So again, I just, we don't need to go too deep, but I thought there were some things to like. So there's been, I think, we were together on Wednesday. Since then we've had a scrimmage that was yesterday, right? Friday morning. Rasmus Dahlin still hasn't skated with the team. It sounded like he skated on his own yesterday. And a guy that's been relatively healthy. I was going back through his past couple of seasons, his last 3, he's had 80 games, 78 games, 81 games last season. So it's not like he's brittle or anything like that. So it's definitely being precautionary. I know a couple of people were asking questions like, is he delicate? I'm like, no, he's been pretty durable for the minutes that the guy plays.
He plays through a lot. He definitely doesn't, come out of the lineup easily. So I think this is precautionary at this point and probably wise to, limit him a little bit. It's going to be, when you're talking about, how to gauge this game when they're playing against the B roster and, they're probably going to face similar on Monday against Columbus, I would think, and there'll be another NHL heavy lineup for the Sabres. And then that's it. They go to Germany on Tuesday night. They play Red Bull on Friday. And then a week later, they're playing the Devils in the regular season. So this really is, as much as it is, you don't want to make too much of it. It is pretty important the next 2 or 3 days for them to make sure they have everything in line. And I think, the Darlene piece of it is just to make sure he's healthy. It's probably the guy on the team you least have to worry about in terms of buy-in and, figuring out the system, all those things. I think he'll be fine. They have plenty of time, plenty of practice time before that first game. But as far as preseason action, working things out, there's some urgency. And I did feel that after the first period. I don't know what was said in between the first and second, but it felt like they came out and took care of business. To your point, that fourth line, I think they're gonna be together to start the season until there's a reason to break them up, because Malenstein, Lafferty, and Aube-Kubel, they have a playing style that Lindy Ruff wants. He compared it to a running game in football tonight, the way they were controlling possession, creating chances, wearing the other team out. They were active after the whistle, I think, which was something that at times was missing from this team. Not that you need to, start a brawl after every, scrum in front of the net, but just there's a sense that these guys are going to stick up for each other, or at least that line is going to do a lot of that. And I think other teams take you a little more seriously when you have some of that. So I thought they were a definite bright spot tonight.
Yeah, pack mentality. I didn't necessarily love that Aube-Kubel hit that he had late in the game on the boards.
Like,
it was kind of questionable. I mean, and
you're up
that's
7-1.
Yeah,
the kid has played 2 NHL games. It's the third period of a preseason game, but
I mean, it wasn't egregious, but it
no,
was. I didn't love it though.
It was a little bit over the line, but that's a little bit of who he is, right? So I think that's why you need a little bit of depth so you can withstand a couple game suspension if it comes along at some point, because that is how he plays the game. And I think it makes him not fun to play against. He's probably harder to play against in that respect than anybody that was on the Sabres team last year. So I think it's definitely a noticeable element, but I agree with you. I thought the same thing in a 7-1 game. A kid that's played 2 NHL games probably doesn't need, if you can see his numbers, you probably don't need to make that hit. But
the kid's coming back off an injury last year too. But I think, at the same time, I mean, I want to laud that unit as a whole for their effort, start to finish. I don't want them to pull back Aube-Kubel by any means, just saying singularly, didn't love it, but it is what it is. So I noticed 3 guys. Were there any other A's? Thompson, Tuck, Cousins.
It was interesting after our conversation the other night. Maybe Lindy was listening, trying to spice up the debate a little bit, but it was, those were the 3 A's, which really only adds more intrigue, I think, to. We'll see what happens on Monday. I guess we'll see who, how close to the same lineup it is. I'm assuming the McLeod line will get in that game, and we'll see which line comes out, but that might change up who has the A. But Cousins getting it was notable to me. I think Thompson and Tuck were sort of the easy crutch choices, right? Your 2 first-line players, a little bit older, been around a while. They've worn those letters before in the preseason, I believe. So, and Tuck has in the regular season. So those felt like easy choices. Cousins, that was noticeable to me. And I brought it up the other night that this is a guy that Lindy Ruff has a lot of belief in and feels really good about. So it's not far-fetched to think, somebody like that can emerge into that leadership group. And who knows, maybe they rotate him around a little bit. I know that is something Lindy Ruff's done in the past. I don't know if that's something he's trying to go back to, but a little healthy competition for those A's, I think, is good as the boys head over to Germany here in a few days.
Cousins was fun to watch tonight as the game kind of played on. I don't recall really noticing any standout plays of him early in the game, but definitely noticed him in the second and third period. He got rolling, was really engaged physically, making plays in both ends of the ice. I thought he had a pretty good game, but when it was all said and done, I mentioned a couple things, I guess, like a Quinn play, a little turnover, because it was like the same play that he made in a game last year that led to a goal against, kind of a blind, just pass. He's facing the boards. He throws it behind him to center ice. Team picks it off. And now Pittsburgh didn't convert it into a goal tonight. That was just one example of a play that I can see being reviewed on video. Was there anything that you saw in the game tonight or even in the scrimmage? Really, is there anything that you saw since you and I were last together that you weren't crazy about, that you wanna see, you expect maybe the team to address, whether it's in drills or as they work out kinks? Um, Defensively, I noticed some different offensive looks, some different set plays tonight. This is the first that I've seen the group. I'm not down in practice. Is there anything, from the scrimmage or, something that stood out that maybe was not I don't wanna say concerning, but you know what I mean, areas to work on?
It was an interesting, yesterday at the scrimmage, Lindy mentioned that he thought Bo Byram was the best player on the ice. And then, what was it, the first minute of the game, he had that backhand pass up the wall that kind of led to, the turnover that led to the penalty that led to, the first goal. That is still probably the big question for me is what this defense looks like. And we've talked about it a little bit, but, can Owen Power be just a little bit stronger of a net front presence, right? I don't think he's all the way there yet. And he's not going to be your sturdiest, hitter. He's not going to be a guy that's your most physical defenseman, but he should be really sturdy in front of his own net. And that's something that you still want to see a little bit more of. I think that's what makes the defensive pairs interesting to me. I still think it will be Byram Dahlin, but I don't know for sure because we haven't seen Dahlin out there for more than like 5 minutes before he got hurt on Wednesday. So then it just becomes a weird puzzle to put together. And we saw last year how quickly that can unravel on them when they had Clifton playing on the wrong side and, certain pairs just not clicking and working well together. Power and Yoki Haru were one that, never seemed to, really hit their stride. So I guess that's the lingering concern for me is how that all comes. There's a lot of talent back there. And there's, the one thing I think about is had they, we had a lot of conversations heading into free agency that about right-handed defensemen, top 4 type guys, physical, older guys, somebody you could pair with Power, right? So you could have Byram Dahlin, Power, and, insert veteran free agency. So when you talk about that cap space that's sitting there, I think about that. Who could you have upgraded on Henry Jokiharju? But good game from Jokiharju tonight. We've seen Jokiharju with Samuelson a bit. That could work. But the problem is who plays with Power at that point? Is it Byram? And then who plays with Dahlin? So it just feels like they're one short of the exact mix that they need unless you go Jokiharju, Dahlin. But Dahlin kind of likes playing on the right. So then you end up back to Power and Jokiharju, Samuelson, Dahlin, or Byram Dahlin, and then Samuelson and whoever they decide to play, Clifton more than likely on that bottom pair. Going to be some mixing and matching there. And the fact that Dahlin is out means there's just less time to figure it out, and get those guys playing with one another. We saw that this time last year, we were talking about Dahlin playing with Clifton. And they kept it together so long that you almost thought that was going to be the pair to start the season. And they switched it before the start of the season. All of a sudden, Clifton's playing on the left, and there were mistakes all over the place. So I'm curious to see how that all comes together once Dahlin's healthy.
No one's going to hold you to this. I certainly won't. But if you had to guess, do you think that Dahlin has a chance of playing on Monday?
I would think they'll be extra cautious.
Yeah.
But
it's an opportunity to get their shit together on the blue line, but I think.
Yeah. But it feels like they'll be cautious there. He hasn't gotten a practice in. They don't practice tomorrow. They may skate on Monday morning. It feels like they don't need to rush him. You could always dress an extra defenseman and limit his minutes and ease him back in. I'm sure he'd love to play. You probably don't want to play him on Friday against, in an exhibition against a team that doesn't care if they're gunning after your big stars, right? Like That's going to be interesting how they balance that. A game that it's like a preseason game in the sense that it really doesn't matter, but it's almost another level, right? Because it's a team in an entirely different league, kind of trying to show their stuff, and maybe there's some heroes out there that could cause you some problems. But I would say
Big
they'll
ice,
lead
so
on the side of
also
being cautious. That's true.
more space
A
to
lot of
get
room to
guys
get
to
out of the
miss.
way.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was kind of curious. I don't think that we'll see Darlene. I just kind of wonder, because they're not going to force it, and that's kind of your point. You're going to be extra cautious. You can put Rasmus Dahlin in there, and then quickly, everything. There will be a trickle down effect, and I think they know what they're going to do when they get Dahlin back in. So I guess it doesn't
I
matter
think
when
so.
they get him in. Yeah. So, it's kind of interesting when going through the box score tonight. Every single Sabres skater had a shot on goal. I don't recall seeing that. And so 3 Sabres led the way with 4 shots on goal. Bo Byram and Henry Jokiharju were 2 of them on the back end. The Sabres forward that led the way with 4 shots on goal was Yuri Kulik. What did you see from Kulik tonight in person? Thought he had some opportunities, but total game, what did you see there? And what's your feeling on Kulik coming away from tonight?
I feel like Kulik is going to have a tough time cracking a roll right out of the gate. The problem he's facing is that more than likely he has to unseat Zach Benson from
Yeah,
his spot
that's
in
not
the top
happening.
6. And
Yeah.
Benson, maybe that was a question a couple weeks ago, right? Like, how will a 19-year-old kid show up to his second training camp? Like, all of us who have watched closely Zach Benson and gotten to know him know that he's not really the type to let his foot off the gas, but you still don't know. And he has been, tonight he was all over the place. He was the same old Zach Benson. And he's a really nice mix, I think, with Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn. There's no reason to force Kulik into that spot. So then you end up with a situation where could you put him on the third line? Maybe, but I feel like you were saying the other night, it's kind of top 6.
Yeah, I think
Or
so, for the way that they want to construct the team, for player types and the roles. Yeah.
and you're talking about a team that wants to, has a lot of urgency to get off to a fast start, a lot of urgency to change the structure they play with, the habits they play with, being better away from the puck, being better defensively. And Kulik has improved a lot in those areas. But that line of Zucker, McLeod, and Greenway, I thought was probably their best line during the scrimmage, or one of their best line. They controlled play a lot during the scrimmage, and McLeod looks really good. I love the way, he's obviously not a physical player. He's, not the biggest, strongest guy in terms of like, his, he's kind of tall, but he's not real, beefy, but he supports the puck well in the defensive zone. He transitions it quickly out
I
of
was
the
gonna
zone,
say
really
that's the
helpful
biggest
on
thing.
breakouts.
Yeah.
And he is, certainly opens up a lot of space with the speed he has in the neutral zone and in the offensive zone. Then you have Zucker, who's, should be just steady as they come, right? A guy that can get to the net, has been around. You can count on him for his habits. And I think Greenway is similar. That Greenway's a little bit out of place on that line because he's not as fast, but defensively still a responsible player. And, maybe, those guys help elevate him a little bit offensively, but I just don't think you want to plug Kulik onto that line at the moment. Maybe if you feel like you need more offense from that group, but when they're talking about the identity that they envision for the third and fourth lines, I don't think plugging in a first-year player is the best option there. And so it might just be Kulik. Certainly, I would imagine will go on the trip to Prague, to Germany and
yeah.
Prague. And then from there, you send him down to the AHL. And if there's an injury in the top 6, I think that's the guy you call up. I think they need to be quicker to call him up this year and plug him in and give him games than they were last year. But I think forcing him into a role isn't really the best thing for him. But he definitely looks a lot better to me than he did 12 months ago in this similar setting, because he is noticeably stronger. And I think because he can feel how much stronger he is, he's a lot more confident in puck battles and in what he's doing away from the puck, and a little bit more composed with it too. It felt like at times last year he was so eager when he got the puck because he's thinking about that NHL roster spot, and maybe he's just a little bit more playing within himself now. So there's nothing really overly negative to say about Kulik. It's just that spot he's gunning for is occupied by a player who I think is, could be in for a really great second season.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that Kulik, looked comfortable out there tonight. Got his shots off, like we mentioned. He was at the edge of the crease, early in the game, getting his getting his hands dirty, getting there to the right spots where you don't often see him. So no, I thought that was encouraging, but I think, yeah, it's a matter of space. But I agree. I think that, certainly looks more of the part this year than he did at any point last year, including when he did get his call. What was it, like midway through the season, I guess, or 60% of the way through the season, whatever it was. So they scrimmaged today also, right? So the group that didn't play, they scrimmaged today. Were you down there for that? Anything?
I was
noteworthy?
not down there for
Okay.
that. That was mostly it was obviously the non-game group, and then I think the McLeod line
Yeah.
played in that one. But I was not down there to see that group. Levi played in that one, and then I'm thinking Kevin Adams said during intermission, I believe, that Levi will play Monday and get the
Yes.
whole game. So that gives you a pretty good idea of how they envision the goalie depth chart at the moment. And I would expect that it's Lukin and Levi for the 2 games in Prague. I think that's probably the big roster question, right? Do you try to pass Reimer through waivers when the time comes? Or do you try to hang on to him and, let Kulik go down or Rusek, Roseanne? It would seemingly to me that Kulik and Rusek are those 2, in addition to Krebs, that are your extra forwards because they've been on the line with Krebs the last few days. But, they may end up hanging on to Reimer depending on what other injuries there are around the league to goalies. I'm not sure how exactly they'll handle that. So he's certainly not of the mindset. I talked to him the other day, and he's certainly not of the mindset that he wants to be going to the AHL, right? After 15 years, basically, of being a full-time NHLer. He's got a place in Buffalo. He's trying to help this team, but I don't know how that's all going to shake out quite yet.
So not going to be a long one tonight, by the way, people. I know we went for an hour and a half just a few short days ago. I'm feeling a lot better, by the way. I'm not all the way back, but I'm back. I did get out and golf this morning, got a nice walk and a nice sweat in. So I think I'm back. But if you miss us on the way in, if you could please like this video while you're here. Good numbers here on a Saturday night. Appreciate everyone coming in. So Matthew, Friday scrimmage, I saw that Consta Helenius scored a goal. We haven't talked a lot about the youngster there, the first pick in this past draft. What are you seeing from him here in his first NHL training camp?
Similar to what I thought coming out of rookie tournament, which I can't remember if this was just something you and I talked about while we were watching those games or if we talked about it on here, that strength isn't quite there, right? And he's 18 years old, and so he's involved in all these battles. He's in all the right areas. He's doing all the right things, but getting kind of pushed around a little bit. And there was some of that in the scrimmage, but you can already see him adjusting, right? And maybe that was just a pace of play thing or the smaller rink getting used to how quick, guys are going to be on you, hitting you. But yeah, he was not phased at all being out there with what was essentially the entire NHL group with enough AHLers and prospects to fill out, 2 teams in that scrimmage on Friday. He was right around the net, picking up his own rebound was how he scored that goal. He rang one off the post. He has been certainly, I think, you get him a little bit stronger and, get him used to hockey in North America on this size rink. And I could see him being ready before the end of the year if there's a
Mhm.
spot for him, if there's a need for him. But I think I think he's going to make an impact in Rochester for sure.
The 3 games so I don't know if this carried over into the scrimmage. The 3 games of the Prospects Challenge, the biggest takeaways I had with him, he's got a low center of gravity. So even though he doesn't have the strength, he still does pretty well. When he's handling the puck and maintaining control of the puck, but it was his command. He has a lot of command to his game, and he was communicating extremely well. So for him to come in, you don't see that a lot, especially in those, he was playing with a lot of guys this is their second, third Prospects Challenge, with the exception of Oslin. This is his first, but I thought his command was really good. And I love the way he was just like directing play when the team was coming out of the zone. Those are noteworthy things. That's almost like those instincts, the leadership. He's vocal. Because a lot of guys aren't, we've seen Sabres teams not talk a lot to each other on the ice, and this kid comes in and he was, that's something I noticed that stood out to me. But I was kind of curious to see how he looked with the big boys here because I haven't been down there yet. Kind of curious to see the start that he gets off to. And I think that, the ice time, he could be the biggest beneficiary in terms of ice time in Rochester if Kulik's, up with Buffalo, even if they keep him around for a little bit longer to start the season. We don't know what's going to happen there. But I just wanted to ask you about that. So we got a chat here.
He'll get a good opportunity as well because you would assume Kulik goes over to Europe. That means Hellenius will get a lot of run in those other preseason games. That's going to open up a lot of ice for. Now, those teams are probably going to be overmatched if any of these teams they play against ice, experienced NHL rosters, but should be a strong experience for all those guys that get left behind on the trip. They get, the chance to play in some legitimate NHL preseason games, which should help a player like Hellenius more than anybody, I think.
No, I think you're right about that. So the chat is definitely hopping here. I'm just going to throw one up because it's a slam dunk. We love Mitch, and Mitch likes the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. I just thought to throw it up. He says the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show rules. Yeah, no shit, Mitch. No, but thanks as always for stopping by. We love our Mitch. So I did star a few. Let me just go through while I'm bringing a couple of these up, Matthew. If you see anything that catches your eye, by all means, jump right in. JMP Flushed It says they really wanted us to know the owner bought a roof. Yeah, I agree. I went there early. But yeah, it's not often that you get to see construction updates on a Sabres broadcast. So I don't know how often they'll show that this season, but it was
they had that as it was one of those behind blue and gold or whatever YouTube exclusives that for the scoreboard, I thought, okay, people want to see the scoreboard, the roof. I was like, I don't know that anybody's tuning in to hear about the new roof that got built, but seems like the fellas down there did a great job with it. So
I was getting all nervous, man, because it looked like it was like a windy day. You got these people just walking up on the roof. They're carrying like loads of whatever that stuff is on their shoulders. I was getting all sketched out watching it. I was like, end this right now. Matt Soda says, I like seeing the team stick up for each other. I hope it lasts. Almost never saw that last year. Yeah, it's kind of refreshing. And Matt, I think that, that's the biggest storyline for me this year is I don't want to get too excited because it's one game, but if that's how they're going to play for all year, then it could lead to a couple more wins just because teams are going to back off you a little bit. They're not going to walk in here with this confidence level because teams come in with a lot of confidence the past couple of years against the Sabres team, thinking they're just going to walk all over them. Team hasn't played well at home, and they don't stick up for themselves. So no, Matt, I mean, that was the biggest thing. And that's why Kevin Adams shopped the way that he did. And we've, this is why Matthew and I have talked for like last year about guys like Ryan Lomberg and Brady Tkachuk and some of these other pipe dream players. It wasn't like go and get those actual players, just get the types of players that drag the team into the fight. And Lindy's said it, 5 guys, pack mentality, and the same thing with Lindy. It's not even just like sticking up for each other. It's hitting. If guys aren't playing physical, they're not going to play for Lindy. So that's going to be the other thing to watch. If you see guys at like an Owen Power, there's a comment in here about Owen Power, when they when things start getting a little dicey and physical, he kind of backs away. He's not going to be able to do that with Lindy. He's going to have to grow into that more this year than ever before, accelerate that part of his development. I know that I always say, human development doesn't always accelerate when your team sucks. But for like Owen Power, he has to start realizing how big he is and use it. Just like I said, I always say to just cancel guys out. That's going to be the first step. He doesn't have to go out there and blow guys up, but it is the physical play. Kevin says that he enjoyed the physical play. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to see more of it. I think the Sabres had 15 hits tonight in the game. My monitor that had the stats up just kind of crapped out. So I think it was 15 though that they had, which is, I think, a decent number for this game.
You could notice a little jump in the crowd. It wasn't a big crowd, and obviously it was the preseason, but you could notice a little jump. I think this is a town that appreciates that style of hockey, and you don't want to go overboard with it, right? Because if you're running around trying to hit everything, you're probably getting yourself out of position and things like that. But there's no doubt there's still a place for it, and I think it. Tonight, as far as sticking up for each other after the whistle and hitting, it's like, okay, you're doing it against, the Scranton Penguins. But, when it's another big boy roster, that's when you start to see that stuff. But that fourth line, I know Krebs has been penciled in there by some people, or he's rotated in at times, but they look pretty solid. Malenstein, Lafferty, Obey, Cubel. And I think that's what you're going to see until further notice because of the combination of speed. And it's just second nature to those guys. I've gotten it's noticeable. You walk in the room and start talking to guys like that. And it's like, you talk about the human development piece. Like, these are fully developed human beings and hockey players. Like, they are who they are. They know their role. They like their role, right? They're not basically in all three of those cases, they're not Peyton Krebs, former first round, 2019 first round pick, offensive superstar in the WHL, who is now being told he needs to play more of a fourth line role. They're not Tyson Jost, right? Same thing, former, high draft pick who needs to do this to survive. These are guys that came up this way, played this way growing up, knew this was going to be their niche, enjoy it. Yeah, you have to enjoy hitting people. You have to enjoy getting hit. And to be able to consistently play a role like this, these are also guys that fought for everything they've gotten in their career to this point. They haven't been handed roles because none of them really were high draft picks. And so whatever role they carved out for themselves, they earned it. And I think that is something that's going to benefit the locker room. It's going to benefit them on the ice because of the way that they play and the way they carry themselves, but off the ice too, that these are guys that are coming for your ice time, right? If Lindy wants to cut back ice time sometimes, I wouldn't be surprised if some of it goes to these guys because of, what they can bring and the way they can play defensively.
You mentioned Peyton Krebs. Fred RT says, I think Krebs starts on the bench this season. I think he means press box, right? Like, do you think, is that what you were interpreting Fred here? I think that he probably is the 13th forward, probably as it stands presently. What did you think of Krebs' game tonight?
Thought he was a little more active shooting the puck, which was good to see. Something that seemed like been harping on for the last 2 seasons with him is that he should shoot more. Maybe there's a bit of a chip on his shoulder, given the fact that he really is on the outside looking in at the lineup right now. And I would expect that, Lindy mentioned yesterday that he thinks Krebs is in that group of players that needs to get better making decisions with the puck. Too many turnovers.
Puck management.
And that's not a problem that he can afford to have. I think Jack Quinn can learn on the job a little bit because he brings so much else to your lineup. But I don't think Peyton Krebs can get away with that, not in the role that he is expected to play for this team. And so he's going to need an injury or a slump from somebody to get a chance. It could come on the fourth line. It could come on the third line as well. But I thought, played a fine game tonight, but did not do anything that made me feel that anybody on that fourth line needs to worry about their job.
Mitch Ramon sends in a $2 super sticker. Mitch, thank you for the cup of coffee. That'll go to Matthew's Coffee Fund since he's down at the arena every day. And we thank you for that, Mitch, very much. Grumpy Scott next up here says Benson is so fun to watch, never stops competing. Yeah, I mean his stick, that's the biggest thing you want to see from him this year. I mean, he got a lot of stick penalties last year because it's so active. But I love the way that he just plays, man. We talked about him all last year. You saw it again tonight. He's just ready to go. Kid gets wound up. He turns into a little piss pot out there. And he's going to get his points. He's going to score. I think that he's better insulated with better players this year, but he's going to, like, a kid like that's going to thrive with the veterans that they brought in. Some of those guys you said that are going to maybe reap more ice time when others aren't pulling their weight. They have a full complement of players, it looks like, this year. And we talked about it maybe a few episodes ago when we were talking about the salary cap and all this stuff. And that's why I wasn't going to beat them up too much for not spending to the cap, just because I kind of like the roster. And you saw it tonight. Now, again, they should have dominated. They should have had the puck a hell of a lot more than Pittsburgh tonight, just by the nature of the level of competition they're playing against. But no, Benson is just, we can say that probably after 90% of the games about Zach Benson, there should be a comment in there like that. That's what I would expect from Benson this season. Brian Cummings writes, every post-whistle scrum after the 7-1 lead had me sweating that the Sabres could get a legit NHLer ding to start the season, just get out of there healthy and ready to start the season strong. Yeah, I mean, it's always a worry in preseason. I get it. But at the same time, if that's going to be their style and they're going to play hard, then have at it. But I don't want to see anyone get hurt either. I think that, I want to end my work day when it's the regular season, sit down and watch a competitive hockey team. I always say that. And of course, them staying healthy is probably the best way for me to get my wish there. You agree with Cummings, I'm sure.
Yeah, they got to be smart about it, but I do think they have to, build that muscle memory a little bit, right? Like, start playing that way right away. Don't coast through. Like I was saying about how few games they have to get ready. You don't have the luxury of coasting through the first one. And so if that's how you want to play, and look, some of those, Scranton Penguins were really trying to be heroes after the whistle. So I think, you have to stick up for one another in some sense. But yeah, I had some similar moments as Cummings, thinking, oh, it was the same as a couple of years ago when Tage got into a fight in the preseason, and I thought, I don't know about that. Like, probably not the best use of your resources. But then he went out and scored 47 goals. So who knows? Whatever guys need to get ready for the season.
Speaking of a player that's scoring some goals, we talked a little bit about this on Wednesday, but we saw JJ Peterka have 3 tonight. So he's off to a pretty fine start here. Not a botter, says Quinn and Peterka getting over 8 mil AAV next summer easy. My thought was that if JJ Peterka does, I'm going to refine the take a little bit, because I was like, maybe he can approach 8. In light of Sidney Crosby taking another 8.7, the number that I'm looking at on pending a good season for Peterka, I think the ceiling is 7.7.
7
that's my
for
that's my
7.7
cutesy
per.
There's the cutesy bold prediction preview take. There you go.
It does seem
We're
like a hockey player thing that a lot of
It
these
is.
guys. UC Saros did it. I think his jersey number was in his cap hit somewhere. I don't know. That might work in the Sabres' favor if he keeps this up. I think, he scored a really nice goal in the scrimmage, and then he had 3, not just, one with a great shot, which we're accustomed to seeing, but some, a tip is nice. 2 tip goals. Wasn't something we saw a ton of from him last season. So that could unlock a lot of offense in his game. And face it, if he's playing a full season with Tage and Tuck, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that come from that. I think it'll be a good episode here in the not too distant future to break down that salary cap next season.
Yeah.
And forecast some of what they're dealing with these RFAs, who's coming off the books, because they've got Peterka, Quinn, Ryan McLeod, Bo Byram, and Devin Levi are all RFAs. And that could look, if Peterka, Quinn, Byram, McLeod, and Levi all have great years, that probably means the Sabres are going to the playoffs. And so if they end up in cap trouble, I don't think anybody's going to be bent out of shape about it. And maybe it'll end up, you could end up with the opposite problem, I suppose. And you'd much prefer the one where all those guys have great years and their numbers go up.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And Druzy, you're a stud, coming in with a $4 super sticker. Thank you. Matt's coffee. He's gonna have the jitters.
I also like this 7.7 for Peterka and 2.2 for Quinn. That's right. He's jersey number 22, so he can take a nice little discount. More than likely, he'll be asking for 8.22 or something.
Yeah,
he'll get his jersey number in there that way. But
guys gonna start wanting to wear 98.
Exactly right, to get their. I mean, it's going to be an interesting year in that regard because they have not locked these guys up early, right? They have not done what they have done in the past. And so they might have to move quickly if, things are trending in a certain direction, the way they did with Cousins a couple years ago, mid-season, getting him locked up. Be interesting to see how they handle it. I think that's an interesting storyline going throughout the season because of the cap space that they're sitting on and because that has always been part of the explanation, right?
Yeah.
Well, just wait because look at all these RFAs that are coming up. And I would say for all of those guys, maybe Peterka feels the most sure, right? Like if you were to lock up JJ Peterka, but even him, it's 1 year that you've seen him so far. I still think he's probably the most, what you got in there.
Yeah.
Quinn has to stay healthy, and you got to see how that goes. Devin Levi is a very young goalie with much still to prove. McLeod, that shouldn't go too crazy because of his role and the fact that he's a third liner, and that number shouldn't go out of control. But Byram is the one that I really am curious to see which direction that goes, because if he outplays Owen Power, and if he's on your top pair, that becomes a not so fun negotiation, I would think, if you're Kevin Adams.
It's kind of interesting. And Frank Farkle, who last episode on Wednesday recommended that you get off the plane in Amsterdam and go to some coffee shops. That was Frank Farkle, I believe, who made that recommendation. Not forgotten, Frank. He says he's kind of connecting Power and Byram right now, but on a different note, he said Power and Byram were really soft, especially in the first period. Their passes were like there was 2 inches of snow on the ice. Yeah, I noticed. I didn't love the Sabres in the first period. I came up and I took some notes, and, they outshot them like by a crazy amount, but they should have. But those were two players that, I was kind of hoping for, just a little bit more jump from both of those players early on. You already mentioned Byram and that first minute up the boards, right? The Pats got picked off, and
backhand soft pass to Frank's point.
Yeah,
it was
Frank's point.
There was nothing on it, and I think that is a question less so about Byram than Power. Is that physicality and that strength. Do you have three guys that are a little too, or two guys that are too similar, probably, in Byram and Power? I think Byram definitely has a little bit more of an edge to his game and a little bit more assertiveness to how he plays. And Dahlin's in a different category entirely, obviously, but which direction does Byram go, and how much can you afford to spend on three defensemen? Really four if you count Samuelson. So it's and you want something left over to round it out, right? Because Yoki Haryu's in the final, is just in a 1 year deal. Clifton, I think, has 1 year after this one, but you do want a little bit of leftover funds to round things out. So Bo Byram is kind of a name to watch for me throughout the season for that reason.
This is why I love our chat, because it's valid. Unfortunately, Kevin says, unfortunately, gave up the first goal again. That needs to change. I know. When I saw, I was like, here we go again. You know, I texted my girlfriend. I was like, well, the game's over. Same old Sabres. I told her before the game, I'm like, I'll let you know if they're worth watching this year. And then a minute later, I'm like, oh, all right, 1-0 Pittsburgh.
Well, I was with you at that first period. I thought the same thing. Just, man, how is this game not 3, 4, 5-1? Like, even the goal against, I thought, it was just like, how is this game not more lopsided? And then they came out in the second period, did what they were supposed to do. And it was like, okay, took them a period to kind of wake up and figure things out. But at least they figured it out, because if the first period had continued on much longer, there would have been a lot of reason for people to feel some type of way about how the Sabres played tonight. But they got it together after that.
So Monday against Columbus, 5:00 start, little precursor to Bills, Jags, Monday Night Football. You thinking same lineup? What do you think they're going to do? I mean, besides Levi and net.
I think maybe the McLeod line gets in.
Yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, that's right. That's an obvious one. Yeah, so McLeod, Zucker, Greenway in for what? Rusek, Kulik, Krebs? Or do you take out Tage? Because I think they might want to keep that line in there to kind of see who separates as 13, maybe, right? Do you sit the Tage line?
You could sit the Tage line. You could sit the Cousins line. You could probably even sit your fourth line if you want. But the other option would be to include the Hellenius line, if any of them are even sniffing the Krebs, Kulik, Rusek trio. But I'll be interested to see how they put it together, because I think a lot of these guys will want another game. It is their last preseason game before the regular season starts, outside of that exhibition, which I think is going to be just a different deal.
So that's why I threw this chat up from Brian Cummings to kind of sort through who that maybe new faces could be in the roster on Monday. So the guys who scrimmaged with the main group yesterday, but sat tonight, were at forward: Zucker, McLeod, Greenway, Rosane, Hellenius, Oslin, and defenseman Ryan Johnson, Gilbert, Clegg, and Rathbone. So yeah, I think you're right. We probably see Zucker, McLeod, Greenway, and maybe we see, and when you say the Hellenius line, that's Rosane, Hellenius, Oslin.
Yes.
Correct. Just for clarification. Okay. I wonder if, I don't know. I was thinking that we'd see a pretty similar lineup on Monday to what we saw tonight, because you want to keep that group just playing, because then it's going to kind of get a little funky. Right. But man, I wouldn't mind seeing those 6 forwards inserted the more I think about it, but they're going to have plenty of opportunities also back here if those guys don't all go. Still kind of curious to see what that 27 is going to be. Yeah.
I think they're comfortably behind Rusek and Kulik too. So I think that just from part of that's like development, right? And the different situations these guys are in. It's not that Hellenius is a worse player than Rusek necessarily. It's just, who's ready. I think Rusek's ahead of Rosane. And then, so they may not get those guys in, because to your point, a night later, traveling to Pittsburgh, that could be the crew that's kind of leading the way for you, is that Hellenius line, because they're probably staying behind.
It's kind of interesting with Rusek tonight. There were a couple loose pucks where he was just quicker to pucks than Kulik was. Like, Kulik was closer and Rusek got there before Kulik. I'm not saying Kulik's slow, but it's just that recognition. And that's kind of Rusek's game too. He's pretty quick, acceleration out of the blocks. Like, if he knows where he has to get somewhere, he gets there pretty quickly. That's a key little differentiator between him and Kulik right now, honestly, for, different roles ultimately at the end of their careers, what they're going to be, we think. But that was something that I noticed tonight. It was kind of interesting, because that's that dog on a bone mentality that you want Kulik to get more of now that he's stronger, more confident. Not saying Kulik had a bad game at all. I thought he looked comfortable out there, had a shot opportunities, didn't score. But that was one thing when we were just talking about Rusek, and I saw a comment in here earlier. Someone had not a botter threw up a Rusek thumbs down. And I mean, I don't know. I thought he played with it himself and was okay. A couple sloppy moments, but that's kind of what you get from Rusek. His game is not pretty. I always say that. He does not have a very pretty game, but he can be pretty effective when he plays within himself. I thought he did that for the most part tonight. You seen anything else in here in the chat? We're almost at an hour. Man, time flies, kid.
When the chat's going like this, we really can rack up the time. A lot of great discussion in the chat. A lot of good point by Stephen Cantor here that Poltapov could come in and backfill one of these jobs. Zucker on a 1-year deal, Greenway on an expiring contract. There are going to be opportunities next season for some of these guys that we talk about, and a good call by Steven to put Poltapov in that bucket because he's off to a hell of a start in the KHL.
Yeah, he's gone his last 2 games without a point, so he's human, but he's looked good both games. Seska plays at 3 a.m., so they're all the way in the eastern part of Russia in Vladivostok tonight. So it's like I might actually stay up and watch that because I'm a loser. But no, Poltapov, with him, the one thing that we got to be mindful of when he comes over is that he doesn't have a lot of experience playing on the North American sized rink. He played the under 18s in Dallas. He played an under 17 tournament in Alberta when he was 17 years old. I think that's it. Like he hasn't played much on the rink, so it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for him. But he's going to be, he'll be in that hopper. But I think it's also worth considering budgeting some Roch time for him, an adjustment. Let him adjust a little bit, get his pro footing over here. But we'll see. It's very early. He's only 6 or 7 games. And I think he's 7 games into his season right now for Seska. But to your point, has looked very good. Very good. KHL does these player rankings. They have a formula, with like shots on goal and shots against and plus minus and all that sort of stuff. He was the 4th best player early in the season in the KHL per that ranking. Thought that was kind of noteworthy for a prospect that some think is like the 20th best prospect. I just don't see it. He's in the top 10.
Yeah, he is sort of out of sight, out of mind, I feel like, for a lot of people.
And that's okay. Yeah, I'm not going to beat anyone up for it. I'm just saying
his situation, the uncertainty, he could sign another contract and then it's just a waiting game again. So because the path isn't as clearly outlined, I think it's easy to forget about him, but we know Chris Baker doesn't forget. He's got those games on the hard drive. He's up till 3 a.m. watching these KHL games,
I was jotting down some notes for the next Prospect Avenue. It's going to be a doozy. We saw Zelenov take a run at a guy yesterday, by the way, got a boarding penalty. Just hit a guy from behind, smoked him. Thought that was encouraging development. I'm pretty good, man. Danny DeBello here. We'll throw one up here. Danny DeBello says, how about some love for Obey Kubel's game tonight? Yeah, hard-nosed. We talked a little earlier, Danny. I don't know if you were in here. Didn't love, Matthew and I were kind of together and not loving the hit from behind on Panamarov. But overall, yes, I think that element is much needed. I don't want to, blow my wad on how useful of a tool hitting is in this, but it's so good to see Sabres jerseys out there in aggressive style. And I think when push comes to shove, I just think of like games against Toronto. I think of games against Boston where that line is going to be so useful and just dragging those guys in. Like it could be different this year, man. Like Toronto fans came and stuffed the arena last year. And Austin Matthews, I think, had that big game, right? And I just think that those guys, that Lafferty, Malenstein, Obey Kubels, are going to change the whole tone of those matchups this year. It could be some Maple Leafs fans a little unhappy when their guys are out getting hit pretty hard.
It's a much different look. It's a much different look than Gergenson's Krebs Okposo.
It's faster. Oh,
they were a solid defensive line, Gergenson's, Krebs, and Okposo. Willing to forecheck, willing to hit, but not, to your point, not nearly as fast. And because they're not nearly as fast, the hits just didn't have the same the same pop. You can just tell that these guys are gonna, you're gonna feel it playing against them.
Brian Cummings is getting a lot of run here in the chat tonight. We're going to throw up another one from Brian. He just wants to know if Matthew has enough changes of proper Bavarian lederhosen packed from Munich. Well,
I'm not going to be in Munich. I'm going right to Prague, so I don't need to have my Oktoberfest attire at the ready. But
you can still wear it in Prague.
I suppose I could, right? I could just. What's stopping me, right? Yeah, I'll fly over there next weekend. It's coming right up. It's snuck up fast, so we'll have to figure out our time difference and make sure we can get some. It'll probably be this evening crowd, unless you're up at 3 a.m. watching Poltapov, and then we can do it at 9 a.m. Prague time.
Prokor Poltapov. Andrewsy, thank you again for the super sticker. Appreciate that. That was very nice of you. I don't think Rusek, this is Andrewsy saying this, I don't think Rusek makes it, so will he go back overseas after the season? I guess we'll see. I know his agent's been very committed. There was a report that came out last offseason about him potentially going back. I don't know if you remember that. And his agent was very aggressive in making sure that got stifled, saying it was not true. And, they're committed to the organization this year. But, I don't know if he'll go back overseas without, seeking an opportunity elsewhere, which is possible. So anytime he gets to showcase himself, like in preseason games tonight, I think are very meaningful for Lucas Rusek. And some of these other guys are going to be playing, that don't go to Europe with the Sabres. Are going to be outside of that 27 player bubble that goes to Munich and Prague. Those guys play in preseason games, every time it's an opportunity. Scouts are watching all these preseason games. So we'll see. It's early. I think, he definitely has designs on playing in the NHL. So I don't see him going back quickly with his tail between his legs if he doesn't make it this season. That's kind of my take. I don't know if you feel the same way, Matthew.
You've got a pretty good read on Rusek and his development. So I tend to agree with what you're saying there. It's always possible that these guys get a little deflated after having knocks at the door, but he strikes me as a guy that could get a chance elsewhere if it doesn't work out here for whatever reason. So, and yet to your point, I don't think would be quite ready to throw in the towel. He's still fairly young, and he had some injuries and stuff that delayed his development.
I love the roof chat. So Steve, 13th Legion, had some good chats at the end of last season or even in the offseason. I remember Steve, I don't know if they were I think he was making me laugh. But anyways, I think he's doing it again right now. So Steve, 13th Legion, has tonight's third stars, JJ, second star scoreboard, first star the roof.
Love it.
That might mean we're done.
Yeah.
Now that we've given the third star, that might be the comment of the night. All right, everyone. If we missed some of your comments, I apologize. I do appreciate everyone hopping in here tonight. Upstate Ev says, heck yeah, I agree. Heck yeah for you coming in here.
If we missed your question, throw it in the comment section of the video. We're always lurking in there trying to answer those or saving them for future shows. So
throw it in the comment section of the video or leave us a voicemail on the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show hotline, 716-202-9153. We're banking them up. Got a couple in the holster already, but I don't want to blow them right now. When things slow down, we'll throw them up. We got some MP3s of these calls that have been made to the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, and a couple of them are doozies. I think that's it. So, Matthew, parting shots, final words. You're going to do your plugs. You can find, let me do your plug for you, Matthew. You can find Matthew Fairburn's work at the Athletics/Sabres. He's got a couple notebook entries there from training camp thus far. Are you filing anything for the morning?
Working on a roster projection. So
I like this. Okay.
We'll see whether it is we'll see what the powers that be decide is the best published time for SEO and all those bells and whistles. So maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday morning. Sort of use tonight as a chance to solidify, some of my early opinions and sprinkle in some color from the game. So that will be up in the next few days at the Athletic.
You could find Matthew Fairburn on X at Matthew Fairburn. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. Take a trip over to sabresprospects.com. Throughout the week, we'll have some prospect updates up. Regular seasons are just getting underway across the board here for pretty much all the prospects. And that'll be your nerve center for everything that's happening in the prospect ranks throughout the season. So for Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew out, I don't know what they're doing. I better go check on them. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks everyone for hopping in here on Zero Notice. We'll see you again next time.